counter sexual and gender-based violence, as well as improving the quality and access to care for survivors. So we know that what needs to be the response has to occur on different levels, and particularly hard for vulnerable groups. Today he serves as head of the Office and Interim Chief of Party for the USAID IMA World Health Countering Gender-Based Violence Program to help communities to respond and prevent gender-based violence in the DRC. His remarks today are solely his own. He's not representing the ABA. And before we hear from Charles Guy, let's look at this video on the work of mobile courts in the DRC.
In response to the DRC's rape crisis, the government passed a national law in 2006 on sexual violence that clearly defines rape and provides expedited judicial proceedings for rape cases and greater protection for survivors. Nevertheless, impunity for perpetrators of sexual violence is widespread. The American Bar Association Rule of Law Initiatives programs in the DRC seek to combat this impunity by providing free legal and psychological counseling, by training justice sector professionals, by educating communities on the 2006 national law, and by supporting local bar associations, human rights groups, and women's organizations. With the logistical challenges faced in the DRC, ABA Roli has collaborated with the government to create a mobile courts program which brings justice to victims in the most remote regions of the country.
Avant que l'ABA n'arrive, nous avions d'énormes difficultés pour atteindre l'arrière de notre province et tenir des audiences. L'ABA, c'est la seule organisation internationale qui soutient la justice communautaire, qui accompagne la justice communautaire dans ses déplacements pour ses tenues d'audience. Et je vous dis que les tenues d'audience en forêt sont vraiment très capitales, dans ce sens que la population maintenant sait que les militaires ne restent pas impunis. Et la population, les militaires savent aussi que s'ils commettent ces infractions-là, il peut être sanctionné conformément à la loi.
Charles Guy, I know you have done an awful lot of work across Africa and certainly also in your service with the Ministry of Justice in Cameroon, both in ensuring access to justice and strengthening laws as they need to be strengthened, and in efforts to counter the terrible sexual violence. And even though the subject is vast, I hope we can zero in on the innovative mobile court and what they represent for access to justice. And maybe you could describe what the approach has been, why it was created, what challenges you faced in providing access to justice, and what has made it successful, because I know that at the grassroots level especially, the mobile courts have made a difference in bringing justice to women in these horrific cases. So maybe you could explain this to us in terms of the approach and how it's worked.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Verver, and the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to this event, to talk specially about one of the elements, the key element of access to justice. That means access to justice institutions, and especially through mobile courts. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, I've been the ABA country director from 2010 to 2018, helping to support the justice system in the country. Now, as you may see behind, I'm serving as the IMA head of office in Goma, but also as the IMA's counter gender-based violence project. So I'm the chief of party for that project, and I'm still working in collaboration with the ABA because we are working with implementing partners, Hill Africa and Panzia, and technical partners. Among those technical partners, we also have the ABA. Before I continue, I just wanted to share, this. I don't know if you see very well. I just wanted you to see where we have concentrated our efforts, to facilitate access to justice to victims of sexual assault. So this is Ambassador Wostrom, I know you know about the DRC, but for the others, this is South Kivu, this is North Kivu, and this is Ituri. I'm sure that you've heard about the eastern part of the DRC. But this is the DRC in the whole, and here you have Kinshasa. Kinshasa is at about 2,000 kilometers from the eastern part of Congo. So where you see red, everywhere, that's where we have concentrated most of our efforts to fight against sexual violence in the DRC. So I wanted to start with this presentation, to make sure that we have a good understanding of the area where these mobile courts are being implemented. So yes, you asked me about the approach. What was the approach? That means the general idea, the general philosophy of what we wanted to do. In fact, the idea was to focus on gender-based violence using the DRC justice system to bring justice to people in remote areas. That means 3 elements: focus on gender-based violence and sexual crimes, using the DRC justice system to bring justice to people in remote areas. So that's like the general philosophy. But now, in terms of strategies, that means that how we reach our goals. We have, first of all, to identify the goals of the mobile courts. You can call it mobile court as well. The first thing to do was to increase access to justice. First of all, increase access to justice. That means that through mobile court, organization of mobile courts, increase access to justice. But you can't increase access to justice without being or making sure that judges, lawyers, and police officers are trained. So we organize as well several trainings, on international law, but also on domestic law for judges, lawyers, and police officers to make sure that they deliver good quality of justice. The other element that was important, in terms of our strategy was the sensitization of communities. Make sure that we raise awareness of public, on the new laws that have been passed by the DRC government, but also emphasizing that the shame and the stigma of sexual assault should be upon the perpetrators and not upon those who have suffered such crimes. That means that the victims. So it was also absolutely important to work with the communities. Now, what are the actions that, the activities that we have conducted to, achieve the goals that I've just described to you? The goals, train, sensitize communities, but also organize several mobile courts in remote areas. So what are what were the actions? So first of all, have the maximum of mobile courts in remote areas. Have the maximum of mobile courts in the remote areas. And I showed you the areas where these mobile courts are being organized. I remember that in 2 years, in South Kivu only, we had already about 20 mobile courts that have been organized. Organize as well training, framework to facilitate collaboration among actors. Continue to sensitize communities by using community radios, theaters, discussion, mass sensitization campaign, focus group, to make sure that we have the buy-in from the community. We also had several, I think at least a minimum of 20 legal health clinics, in the areas that I showed to you a minute ago. The aim of the legal aid clinic was to increase SGBV survivor access to legal and psychological assistance. We also facilitated, mobile investigation because crimes are committed in remote areas, whereas you have, police officers and prosecutors' office in towns. So it was absolutely important and even necessary, to organize mobile investigation before, organizing mobile courts in the remote areas. In terms of mobilization of resources, because yes, you can have these courts, but you should be able to mobilize resources. So the first strategy was to work with other partners, in terms of, mobilizing human resources. First of all, judiciaries. That means that we need police, we need prosecutors, we need judges, but also partners. We used to work with UN, that means MONUSCO, UNDP, but also with other international organizations like Lawyers Without Borders, Avocats Sans Frontières in French, but working also, as I said before, with national partners like Hill Africa Hospital, Panzi Hospital, and that's what we continue to do currently with the CDBV project I'm piloting here with the IMA. So we also had to mobilize finance resources. Once again, bringing all the partners together, UN, other organizations, to make sure that, because mobile courts are expensive. So yes, we had to work with other partners to make sure that we have enough resources to go to the field and facilitate the organization of mobile courts. In terms of material, yes, once again, you have to make sure that you have tents, you have computers, you have transportation, you have accommodation, and you have all the security arrangements that are needed, for the organization of the mobile court in the field. Just to conclude on this, in terms of the impact that I've seen, while organizing, facilitating, because I should say it clearly, in fact, we are facilitating the organization of mobile court because the mobile court are organized by the judiciaries. They are organized within the DRC justice system. So we don't create a parallel system. What we do, we bring our expertise, we bring our means to facilitate the organization of mobile court by the DRC justice actors. So in terms of impact, what I've seen is the decrease of stigma attached to the victims of sexual violence. That means that we saw the community more engaged in protecting victims. Also, the awareness of the communities about sexual violence, but also we saw, that all the activities that we have conducted have helped, the community to be able to report crimes of sexual assault. And what I used to say is that one of the main effects of mobile court is, what I call positive fear. That means that in some area you see justice system in activity for the first time, and if I take for example the case of Fizi, where a colonel was arrested, prosecuted, and sentenced, this created a positive fear in the community. People realized that it is possible to see justice in action, in activity, and that even the colonel Kibibi, could be prosecuted and sentenced. And this changed completely, the dynamic, in that community. In terms of successes, yes, victims in remote areas have been able to access justice. We should also say that we saw the willingness of the judiciaries to prosecute and to sentence perpetrators of sexual violence, be they military or civilians. The training on international law have also created a huge impact, and there have been a reversal of sex crime stigma. That means that instead of pushing the shame on the victims, in some communities, they started to, put the shame on the perpetrators, what is a very good result for me. And what I liked mostly was also the collaboration between the different actors. That means that judiciaries, international organization, the UN. So we work together to bring justice to people in remote areas. I can come back to you later with the challenges and other lessons learned, from our activities in the field while implementing mobile courts. Thank you.
No, Charles, Guy, that was extremely helpful, and I think the point you made about the positive justice, people in the local area, because impunity reigns typically, and for them to see real justice finally rendered is very important. And I was watching Minister Wallstrom as she was nodding affirmatively as you were speaking, because she spent so much time in the DRC, and we know how difficult it is to really make access to justice a reality, and then to make the perpetrators to be shamed, and not those who are the survivors of the horrible deeds that they have done. Maybe you could just, we're running out of time, if you could just give us one or two quick lessons about how we can take your experience with the mobile courts, no matter other places where we're trying to ensure that justice can be rendered.
Okay, thank you so much, Milan. The very last thing I wanted to say before I take the lesson is that, one of the main challenges that we have in facilitating the organization of mobile court is security. Sometimes these mobile courts are organized in remote areas where you have, armed groups surrounding the areas where the mobile court is organized. You are aware of the last, events that happened here near Goma. So that's the type, that's where, mobile courts are organized in this type of environment. So it's really challenging in terms of security. But in terms of relations, I think that one of the positive things that I can say is that that's complementarity. That's, the positive aspect of complementarity. That means that we saw the willingness and the capacity of the justice system, despite of the fact that this has been supported by international organizations like the American Bar Association, like the IMA, funded by USAID, but it is an example of positive complementarity in the country using the justice system, but also using the justice actors. And justice is brought to people in their areas. I think that this is what I like the most here. Justice is brought to people in their areas, and they can see justice in action, and they learn to respect justice, and justice create what I call again the positive fear in their community. And the other thing that the other lesson that we can take from this is the involvement of community. You can't succeed without working with the communities. They are at the center of any type of mobile court you want to support. And the very last thing is, like the mix of, or the adaptation we had. That means that we facilitate access to justice through mobile court, but we know at the same time that one of the main challenges that victims are having in the DRC is reparation, damages. At the end of the process, nothing is paid to the victim. So the strategy that we found was to include ADR, alternative justice dispute resolution, at the end of the process. That means that we try through the Tushinde project, or the CGB project I'm managing now, to bring both the families together to discuss about reparation and bring peace in their community, knowing that within the justice system, it has been absolutely difficult or impossible to facilitate reparations for victims.
Thank you so much. Wonderful lessons that you've conveyed, and I love what you said about the investment of the community and the proximity of the access to the justice system close to them. So hopefully we'll have a little time to come back to you, but I'm going to move now to India and to Trisha Shetty, who is an activist for gender equality. She's the founder and CEO of She Says India, a leading NGO created to empower women to act against sexual violence. She's also a key contributor to our Beijing 25 report, and we're so grateful to her for her participation. In her work, she's engaged thousands of young people through workshops and online to create awareness, to provide support to survivors of sexual violence, and she's very well known for her human rights advocacy. So really from her we will hear about the importance of grassroots advocacy and the level that I'm sure many of our participants are active in that area. She's been especially involved in gender-sensitive policies and law and preventing sexual violence in India. She's also the president of the Steering Commission for Peace, which is part of the Paris Peace Forum, an organization that brings leaders together from across the sectors to create collective action